Hello everyone, and welcome to this slightly delayed Lunch and Learn presentation on the switchover to STB-based plotting, which is going to happen next week. This is our first of two presentations. It was supposed to be the second, but I had to go out of town last week due to a death in the family. There will be essentially a rerun of this presentation on Wednesday of next week. It's mandatory that production staff, and it's recommended that project managers attend one of these two presentations, but you don't need to attend both of them because they'll both be basically the same thing. This presentation is also being recorded for those people who couldn't attend either session and for staff that we hire later. I'm requesting that you hold any questions that you might have until the end of the presentation, as they might be answered in the course of the presentation. If you're worried that you'll forget what you were going to ask, you can type the questions into the chat window. I think it's Alt-H to get to the chat window. Yeah, Alt-H it tells me. And then we'll go through the chat window and answer the questions at the end of the session, and you can also ask other questions by unmuting yourself at the end of the session. There will be lots of time for questions and answers at the end. So this presentation is also the first in a series of training CAD and BIM lunch and learns that are planned this year. In the coming months, there will be sessions on BIM 360 and standards and best practices for AutoCAD and Revit. Each month, we will present one of the topics above, one of the topics in the list here. And we'll present each of these topics on 2 different days in the hopes that everyone will be able to attend one session or the other. Topics for later presentations are open to suggestions from project managers and production staff, and you can email Rachel with suggestions for those. Today's presentation will go over the changeover to using STB files for plotting. Effective August 10th, 2020, that's this coming Monday, new projects at Osborne Engineering and O-Sports will no longer use CTB files for plotting and will instead switch over to using an STB file. Now, I expect that changeover will generate a lot of questions, starting with, what does that even mean? And continuing with, why are we changing? Which projects will be affected? What do I have to do differently? What other changes are going on? And probably other questions as well. This presentation is intended to answer those questions. So first, that sentence here in the larger letters. What does that even mean? What are these files and what do they do? So basically what that sentence means is that Osborne and O-Sports are going to change the method we use to control the thickness and color or gray value of plotted lines. We will be changing from controlling the appearance of lines indirectly by specifying one of 255 screen colors to instead changing or rather controlling the appearance of lines directly by assigning layers one of 13 plot styles and a line weight value. Don't worry, we've worked to make the change as simple and as painless for you as possible. In fact, some of the common tasks will even get easier, but you still probably have questions about what this all means. So what are these files of which I speak? They are files that tell AutoCAD how the drawing that you see on the screen is supposed to look when you put it on paper. Until now, Osborne has used CTB files to plot. CTB files have been around for a long time. They date back to when plotters looked like this, and you had to tell the plotter which physical pen to grab with the little mechanical hand to draw each screen color that you used. As technologies advanced, CTB files evolved a little so that you could click this little button here in the plot dialog box, and it would bring up another dialog box where you could specify a virtual pen, or you could tell it a color of ink or a grayscale and a line weight to use. But still, when you do that, you're telling it what to do for each screen color. These settings would then get stored in a CTB file that you could reuse to plot other sheets, and those files had a file extension of .ctb for color table. Hey, I didn't name these things myself. But then, about 20 years ago, Autodesk came out with .stb files, or style table files, that more directly control how lines plot. And AutoCAD gave users the choice of whether to use CTB files or use STB files for plotting. .stb files are generally easier to use if you set them up right, and larger firms sort of tend to eventually get around to using them, but .ctb files are more familiar to the long-time CAD users, and it's not like CTB files are totally awful. So most firms, especially the smaller firms who don't have a full-time CAD manager, haven't really bothered to make the switch yet. But every year, a few more firms do it. So the industry is slowly inching in the direction of STB files. And Osborne is going to make that switch on Monday. So does that mean that our drawing files are going to be different from now on? Well, a little bit. Drawing files know whether they are meant to be plotted with a CTB file or an STB file. And by that, what I really mean is that each drawing stores the value of a system variable called P-style mode. A P-style mode of 0 means that the drawing wants to be plotted with an STB file. A P-style mode of 1 means that it wants to be plotted with a CTB file. We just have one folder on the Q drive that has all of our CTB and STB files in it. But when you go to plot, AutoCAD will not show you all of the files. It will show you just all of the CTB files or just all of the STB files, depending on which type of file your drawing file is meant to be plotted with. There's a command that you can use called convert P-styles that you can use to convert a drawing from using a .ctb file to using a .stb file, or vice versa. It basically flips the switch back and forth. Then after you tell it to use STB files, you need to tell it which STB file to use, and you need to tell the layers which plot styles they should plot with. That's actually simpler than it sounds. When CAD coordinators get a title block to use from outside of Osborne, and that title block, when they receive it, it's set up for CTB files. The CAD coordinator will need to do that conversion and assign plot styles to the layers instead of finding colors in the CTB file that look like what the architect or outside consultant used for their CTB file. There's sort of a conversion from their CTB to our CTB file that the CAD coordinator has to do. That will be different now. Civil engineers will also need to do that conversion when they want to edit a survey file that used CTB files. But that process will be covered in a separate presentation on Monday for the Civil Department. The style table file, osborne.stb, defines plot styles that say how things in your drawing should plot, whether they're supposed to be black or white or some sort of gray or maybe even plotted whatever color they are on the screen. Some firms make huge, complicated style table files with 100 different combinations of color and line weight and line type. We're not doing that. Our style table has just 12 styles plus this default style called normal that you can't get rid of. Our plot styles just say how dark the object should be drawn, or whether it should be drawn the excuse me, whether it should be drawn the color that appears on the screen. So most layers will have a plot style of mono black, which says plot the styles on that layer black using whatever line weight the object has in AutoCAD, which should just be the line weight of the layer. The line weight of the object should be by layer, and then it pays attention to the line weight of the layer instead. The plot style mono screen 0 says to plot the object white, which you'd use like for masking regions, using whatever line weight the object has. All of these other mono screen number plot styles mean plot the line or the object using that % gray. And the object color plot style says to plot the object or the layer the same color it is on the screen at whatever line weight the object or layer has. And these plot style names are all really straightforward. You're never going to be confused about what a plot style looks like. And by the way, if you make a layer or an object true color, or you assign it a colored book color, like a Pantone color, it will then plot its actual color regardless of the plot style. So when we plotted using CTB files, the layer manager always showed a line weight for that layer. But that line weight in the line weight column of the layer manager was always non-binding. It had no actual effect on the plots. It could affect things how it looked. It could affect how things looked on the screen if you set AutoCAD to display the line weights. But what controlled plotting was always the line weight that was given for each color. Now, back when she was an intern, Sarah Wilson spent a lot of time going through all of our layers and making sure that this line weight matched what the color table said, but those line weights were just there for your reference. They didn't actually affect plotting. We just tried to put the line weights here so that you wouldn't have to go back and look them up in the CTB file manually. Now, the way that we're setting up the STB files, these line weights will now control the plotted line width. The plot style will control the color or shade of the line, and the line weight will control the line weight. So if drawing files know whether they are meant to be plotted with STB files or CTB files, and if the layers in the drawing files have to indicate a plot style from our STB file, doesn't that mean that all of our templates and our frames and details and blocks and stamps and other drawing files all need to be converted? Yes, but we took care of that already. You may have noticed that on the Q drive in the last few months, the folders that had drawing files in them started to sprout subfolders that were called CTB and STB. We ran some automated scripts that took our existing templates and DWG files and converted them to plot using STB files instead, and assigned plot styles to the layers so that they'll still plot with the same appearance that they had when they were based on CTB files. The converted versions of all of these files were put in these subfolders called STB, and they've been sitting there for safekeeping until we were ready to do the rollout and actually convert to using STB files. That rollout is coming this Monday. So Sunday afternoon and evening, I'm going to take all of our existing DWG files that are on the Q drive, and I'm going to move those drawing files from whatever location they're in down one level and put them into the CTB folder. Those files are going to stay in those CTB folders probably for at least a couple of years until all of the projects that use CTB files that are currently underway get finished up. I don't think that the files in these CTB folders are going to be needed very often because the STB-based details and blocks and so forth can still be XREF'd into CTB-based drawings just fine. So you can XREF or insert your existing details, and you can XREF or insert these new versions of the details and blocks into your grandfathered in CTB projects, and that should work just fine. The CTB projects are going to ignore the plot styles and just plot based on the color instead, but none of the colors of these files are changing, so they should plot just fine. And then after moving the CTB files down a directory, then I'm going to copy the converted files out of the CTB folder and put them up a directory to the locations where the CTB files used to be until now. So why are we doing all of this? Well, there's several reasons. First, we want to give users more direct control over a layer's plotted appearance. a lot of times you need to create your own layer for, I don't know, methane reclamation or snowmelt piping or future equipment or some other weird thing. So you need to create a layer that isn't in the template and it isn't in the button on the Osborne ribbon that you click to add the layers for your discipline. They're sort of one-off layers. And a lot of projects have those. When you create a new layer for those purposes, then you have to decide how that layer is supposed to plot. And you go to the plot dialog box and you look at the color table and you try to pick a color that plots with the line weight you want. Preferably a color that doesn't look like other stuff in the drawing. And that's kind of a pain, actually. STB files make that way easier. You just create the layer, set the line weight, choose a plot style for the shade of gray you want, and you're done. Another reason why we're changing is that we want to allow disciplines, especially civil, increased flexibility to assign readable colors to new layers. The way we were doing it, if you needed to create a new layer that plotted with some weird combination of line weight and shading, you had to choose from some crappy, murky reject color that nobody else wanted to use. You know, some color that you couldn't see on a black background. Now, when you create a new layer, you'll be free to give it a nice readable color because plotting is going to be controlled by the line weight and the plot style of the layer, not by the color. And we also wanted to eliminate disputes between disciplines when one discipline thought that a color should have one line weight and gray value, and another discipline wanted that color to have a different line weight and gray value. Using STB files will avoid those disputes, and it'll also mean that we don't need to create multiple CTB files for Osborne for different disciplines. And then one final reason why we're making this change is because the industry really is moving in this direction, not very quickly, but it's inching towards using STB files. So, which projects will be affected by this change? Any project that started on or after this Monday, August 10th, shall be set up as an STB-based project. This is mandatory except in cases where the client or owner dictates otherwise. Drawing templates and frames and blocks and so forth that are on the Q drive will all be located in the same folders with the same names as previously, but starting on Monday or Sunday night really, all of those files will expect to be plotted with an STB file instead of a CTB file. Since the paths and the names are going to be effectively the same, Osborne customizations should continue to work. And if you really, really need the CTB version, it's still going to be there, but it's going to be one level down in the directory structure. But for new projects, you're not going to be doing that. Sorry, I started talking about CTB-based projects there. For the new projects, you just use the files that you're used to using. It's just that now they're friendly toward STB plotting. For projects that are already underway, keep doing what you've been doing. Don't convert any of your drawings to being STB based if you started them CTB based. There's no reason to change over. If you need to create new sheets in an ongoing project, then you should either copy and modify some existing sheet that's already set up for the CTBs, or you can also create a new sheet, but the template that you'll use to create the sheet is going to be located one level deeper. It's going to be under Q, Production Software, AutoCAD, General, Templates, and then in this CTB subfolder. And on the ongoing projects, continue using the same frame files and attribute files. If you need to place details or blocks or diagrams, you can place the new STB-friendly versions, and they still should work fine in CTB-based projects. And if you really need the old ones, like maybe if you had a sheet of a whole bunch of details, like a dozen details, and you normally just stuck a new title block on that for each project, okay, then maybe you need to use the old CTB-based drawing so that it'll plot properly, and that'll be in a subfolder. But I don't recommend that you do your details that way anyway. So got my sheets kind of out of order here. But so that's a lot of information, and it may sound kind of scary, but it's really not bad. What all do you have to do differently? Not very much, actually. For most people, you'll just need to do a couple of things different. If you happen to be the CAD coordinator on a job, you'll need to do three things differently. The CAD coordinator, when they receive a title block from another firm that we're supposed to use, if that title block is set up for, this should say, CTBs, use the convert P styles command to make their CTB-based title block be STB-based instead. And then the CAD coordinator will change the plot styles for the layers to Osborne plot styles, and they'll assign line weights so that the title block will look like the other company wants them to look. If you're not the CAD, well, even if you are the CAD coordinator, whether you're the CAD coordinator or not, if you create a new layer for some weird one-off thing that only this project needs, then when you create the new layer, you can assign the new layer any color that you want. There's no need to pretend to plot so that you can go examine the CTB line weights. You can just give the layer any color you want, assign it a grayscale value by giving it a plot style, and give it a line weight. And when I say give new layers a plot style based on what color or gray value you want it to plot, that includes the layers that are created when you click the Delta button from the Osborne tools, or if you click one of the phasing buttons and it actually creates a new layer, you'll need to assign plot styles for those as well. I have some code that will let me set those automatically that I downloaded from a public domain site, but I have to wrap my head around how that works before I can splice it into our tools. And finally, the last thing you'll have to do different is when you plot, you'll tell it to use osborne.stb instead of osborne.ctb. So I'm going to hop into AutoCAD here. I always make my command line really huge so I can read the diagnostic information that goes scrolling by. So now I'm going to show you how you do those things. Here we have a title block from another company. How do you tell whether it's set up for CTB plotting or STB plotting? Well, one easy way is to tell it you'd like to plot and take a look up here and see whether it's using, it wants to use a CTB file or an STB file. We can see that this title block here wants to use a CTB file. Darn, we have to convert it. We can also tell that it wants to use a CTB file by coming down here and telling it P-style mode. And it tells us the P-style mode is 1, which means a CTB-based file. And you'll also notice that we can't change the P-style mode value directly like you can with most system variables. Because when you convert it to the other type of plotting mode, you need to also tell it how, not just to convert the file, but how to convert the file. So we use a different command for that, and I'll show you that in a minute. But first, we want to look at their title block and see what their CTB file says about the colors that they use. And we want to see what colors they're using. So if we go to the Layer Properties Manager, we can see that they're using color 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, and some other colors. Just, you know, this is similar to what we do now when we try to modify their title block to work with our CTB file. Now we're going to modify the title block to work with our STB file. So if we go and we look at their CTB file, we can look up the colors that they use in their title block, and title blocks don't usually have a whole lot of different colors, you know, like maybe 10. This one has a few more than normal, but still not too many. So we can see, for instance, that color 1, for its line weight, it says use the object line weight. Color 2, color 4, they all say use the object's line weight. Cool. That means that the other company is plotting their lines based on this actual line weight. So the line weights match how they want them to plot. So cool, the other company did half of their work for us, half of our work for us there, half of the conversion. If you found out that these line weights were like all set to default regardless of what line weight the color was set to plot with, then you'd need to come in here and just reset the line weights to whatever their color table said for that color. So after setting the line weights, the CAD coordinator will come down to the command line and type convert. Hopefully it'll spell better than me. Convert P styles. And that flips a drawing back and forth between being CTB based and STB based. And when you do the conversion, you need to tell it an STB file to use for the conversion. And the STB file that you should use for the conversion is this one here, osborneconversion.stb. So we do that, and if we look at the layer properties manager now, we can say it no longer says a color for the plot style. Instead, it says another plot style that looks very similar to the color that it was listing a moment ago. However, all of these plot styles are, I was going to say they're currently grayed out and we can't change them. If they are, a lot of times it happens that you can't change these plot styles until you save and close the title block and then you open it back up again. This looks like it's going to let me. So instead of closing and reopening the drawing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of their layers that I want to have be black, and you can use the Control key and the Shift key to help you select multiple layers at the same time. I don't want depth points to be black. Depth points is not going to plot anyway, but still, I still don't feel like calling it black. So for all of these styles, I'm going to tell it, okay, now I want to use the real plot style table that it's going to plot with. That's going to be osborne.stb. And all of these layers are going to be mono black. Most of your layers are going to be mono black, except for like your XREF layers and maybe a few others. So you can see it's changed those, and then I'm going to make my shading be, they seem to have it as a 50% gray, so I'm going to keep it as a 50% gray. Depth points I really don't want to see. So I'm going to set that to be a screen value of 20. Oops, I missed good old layer 0. I'm going to make that one black as well. So at this point, oops, missed. Okay, so a couple of the layers it's being stubborn about their plot style. That would probably go away if I just closed the drawing and reopened it. Yep. Okay. So at this point, the title block's basically ready for use, and the CAD coordinator can send out an email to everybody saying, hey, the title block's done. And that's basically it for converting a CTB title block from outside of the office. So even if you're not the CAD coordinator, you may need to create a new layer for something unusual in the project. Because that layer, the layer that you need is not one of the default layers that one of our projects starts off with, and it's not a layer that gets added when you click one of these add layer buttons for your discipline. So you need to create something new. And by the way, in the Layer Properties Manager, if you select a layer like, we'll say, piano text. If you have a layer selected when you create a new layer, the new layer will basically be a clone of whichever layer you had selected. So you can use that to save a few seconds by not having to put in a line weight or a plot style. But let's go ahead. Oh, it looks like that discipline still needs to update their setup file. So let's undo a few steps and use a different discipline here as an example. Let's say that we're structural instead. So we're going to get a bunch of structural layers now. Okay, that's still not set up right. I'll get that taken care of. Oh, that's because I haven't actually moved the files yet. So that will be taken care of on Sunday when I migrate the files around. These will start inserting setup files that have the plot styles set correctly. Anyway, let's say we need to create some new layer. And I had done that up here in the P's. I don't know where it went. So I'm just going to create another new layer here. Piano, some sort of other stuff. I need to set the line weight, and I need to set the plot style. I want this to plot black, and for some reason this is going to be real teeny tiny text, so I'm going to use a 0.18, teeny tiny annotations. So you just tell it a new line weight and tell it a new plot style, and that part's fairly straightforward. You don't have to hop back to the plot dialog box or anything like that. When you do plot, The only difference is going to be that instead of telling it osborne.ctb up here, you tell it osborne.stb. And assuming you started with the new templates, the STB files are going to be the only files that it shows here. It won't even show the CTB files. And that's pretty much all that's different. The adding new layers, the processing the incoming title block, and one teeny tiny change in the plot styles, the plotting procedure. So are there any other changes that are being made? There are some. There is a new civil standards rollout, or rather a rollout of new civil standards that concern the civil 3D template file, the fonts, the layer names, some of the drafting techniques, how you process survey files, and so forth. There's going to be a separate presentation for civil standards on August 10th. We are also rolling out new title blocks for Revit as well as for AutoCAD, and we even made old CTB versions of the new title blocks. The new title blocks are going to have updated, smarter company logos. We're getting rid of that empty box for the second PE stamp that nobody uses anymore. We've added some mechanisms for putting in the text that goes underneath the PE stamp. The Florida digital signature blurb or a generic blurb for other states. And we've taken some care to streamline and preset more of the stuff in the print dialog box. So printing should go more smoothly for you. There is a separate video. It's about 50 minutes long that covers everything you ever want to know about the title blocks and the logos in AutoCAD. That video is currently in a folder on the T drive. It's at this location. That will be moved to a permanent location on the bridge, but viewing that video is mandatory. I would recommend that you do it like over lunch one day. And one other change, well, it's not really a change. It's more of an additional service that IT can provide. When we updated those 30,000 or so drawing files from being CTB-based to being STB-based, we didn't open all 30,000 files manually. We ran a script that would open each file in a folder or in subdirectories of that folder, and it would do a certain standard thing to them, like use the convert p-styles command or run other list routines. And we can modify that same script file to do other things in both the drawing files. So, for instance, we could modify it to open up all the files and insert a block that said "not for construction" in the same place on every drawing. Or you could go through the drawings and remove that block from them. Or you could swap out one symbol for another symbol in all of the drawings, or fix a typo that you made on every single sheet, or change the layer settings or something. Anything like that that's repetitive and doesn't require intelligent decision making could probably be automated. It's probably not going to be worth it if you only have like 20 drawings to change, but if you have 200 drawings to change, it's definitely worth considering. Talk to me if you find yourself in that sort of situation. So, other questions. I saw that that some items in chat kind of started popping up. If we have to send a CAD drawing to another party, do we send the STB file via e-transmit like we did with STB files? Yes. If they're opening our file, then that's all they need. If they're planning on XREFing our file into one of their files, they shouldn't really even need the STB file except to look up what our line weights are, maybe. And they probably won't even need to do that because they're probably going to be assigning it their own line weights anyway if they're XREFing it. But yes, we would send them the STB file just as a standard procedure, just in case they do need it. Oh, Patrick answered that. Does the polyline width affect the line weight setting of the STB plot file? The polyline width is independent, well, mostly independent of the line weight in the STB file. Line weights are kind of a special creature. They're almost more of an area fill or a really long, skinny, solid hatch. So the only way that they're affected by the STB file at all is if you plot with certain P-line settings, then they'll pay attention to it. But that will only affect like the outside border of the P-line or hatching pattern. So it's in general, the STB file or the layers line width are not going to affect polylines at all. Polylines are like their own separate animal. Oh, Patrick answered that as well. How will you know if a file still has to be converted to STB? By going into that file and pretending to plot it, or by checking that file's P-style mode. If you are not using the right STB file, or if you have not set up that drawing for the STB file you're using, then yes, the PDFs will look crappy, just like when you plot a drawing using the wrong CTB file. So that's why we will process the incoming title blocks, and when we XREF architectural underlays into our files, we will assign the layers of that XREF whatever line weight we want them to have. Okay. Rachel, could you unmute people so that they can ask other questions?
Everyone has the ability to unmute themselves. So if you have more questions you'd like to ask verbally, you can do so now.
Ah, excellent. That way we won't have background noise times 99 attendees.
All right. Seems there's no other questions. So again, I'll remind everyone, this is track time on your timesheet under OVT2, under seminars, so that Rachel has a time tracking. That's where it should be put. So if you have any questions, just ask Rachel. We you know, part of your policy manual and everything else that you've all signed on says, you know, we want you to have 16 hours of trainable credits. Mike will be attempting to get us actually PDHs for all these trainings that we're going through. So please make sure that you put it on the timesheet in that manner.
Thank you, Sean. If you think of questions later, you can just send email to support@osborne-eng.com. If the first time you work on an STB-based project, if you're a little unsure of yourself and you'd like to have Philip or I kind of look over your shoulder, make sure you're doing things properly, we'd be happy to do that. But we've tried to make things so that they'll be as easy on you as possible. We will be continuing this series of lunch and learns, and if you have ideas for something that you would like to see covered, you can send a request to Rachel Hill through email. And I think that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.